Welcome to the Capricorn Solar Festival. This is the high time of the year. We, as a group, reaching the mountaintop. And today, we invite us to reflect on the topic of the power of invocation and evocation. And our guests today, Barbara Valocore and Steve Nation. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Steve. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Sasha.
Hi, Sasha. Hi, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you for joining the circle today. And on Inner Planes, we are part of one big group. And today we have an opportunity to share on this very important topic. So I invite you to take symbolic microphone in your hands and let's start this sharing.
So welcome everybody. We're really pleased to be here and doing this and being with the group in this sort of very non-physical way. It's wonderful. So the way we're going to do this, and Steve's coming in a second, we'd like to have this really be very interactive. So rather than us doing, 20 minutes or a half an hour of talking, we'll just start some general remarks, and then if you have a question or a comment, feel free to do it like as soon as that comes up for you, so we can really get everybody in the conversation. Steve?
Yes, thank you. So, yes, welcome everyone. It's a joy to see the names and see that one of the lovely things is to watch this name of the number of attendees that I think all of us can see is growing up, is growing up. It's moving upwards. So there's a lot of friends we know. There's a lot of friends whose name we know and haven't yet had the opportunity to meet eye to eye and heart to heart. But together we're in this field heart to heart, and it's pretty incredible to have the opportunity to be in this field today, which for us in the eastern zone of the US is the first day of distribution of the Capricorn full moon. For some, it's the actual day of the full moon. And to be shining a light on the theme of invocation and evocation. And we chose this theme because it is so central to the teachings. It is such a characteristic of the Alice Bailey's stream and the whole of the Ageless Wisdom tradition. Now, if you take all of those great sort of initiatives that came through around the early years of the 20th century, all of the Theosophical Initiative, following on from HPB, then Sri Aurobindo, Rudolf Steiner, Hazrat Inayat Khan, every tradition, and so many that we know nothing about, who brought this whole new sense of the reality of the chain of being, the hierarchy of being. And in that whole field of new teaching about spirituality, one of the primary things that Alice Bailey brings is a focus on invocation. It's something you rarely hear from any group outside of the Bailey network. So we're hoping that this time, in the light of the Capricorn full moon, as a group together, the 65 of us, we might really, as a group, shine a light on what our work is in relation to invocation and the work we've been given. Barbara?
Oh gosh, it's such a big topic. As we were studying this, it's huge. And it reminds me that there's, for the individual, when you're first learning these teachings, you're invoking your own soul. And then you find out that the soul is group conscious, and so you're not really alone. And then as we really start to work in our groups and get a little more familiar with the concept of group work, we find that we're invoking the hierarchy, and we're invoking energies together that we can't do alone as human beings. Some of the great ones may be able to do it, but we can't do that. And it's a very powerful thing to me to imagine that we humanity has the power to create momentous changes within the hierarchy, which we're told that we have. Steve?
So as a way of doing this, we have a few thoughts ourselves that are just taken from the teachings. And let's begin with this passage that was sort of describing the theme of this webinar, which comes from Raise 5, page 78 on Raise 5, and it points out that at this time, and for us, we should always think that is our time, that is my time. In other words, this incredibly tumultuous time in human affairs that I'm living in the latter part, not the latter part, but just past the midway point of my life. Now, in this section, we're told that two incredible things are happening, and in a way that this has changed the whole history of the evolution of the planetary life. People are being stimulated and brought to that point of necessary tension, which has to precede the great moving forward upon the path of evolution. So there's a huge stimulation of human consciousness. That means every unique point of human consciousness, every human being in their own way, is being stimulated and brought to a necessary point of tension, not necessarily something pleasant. And secondly, what's happening now is that a process of reorientation is going on, which will eventually enable the mass of human beings, the huge collective, to present a united front upon views hitherto regarded as the vague visions of intelligent and optimistic dreamers. And for me, that's encapsulated by the thought that as we're moving through these critical years, we can expect and we can evoke from the mass of humanity a sense of alliance with, a sense of affirmation of the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, because they encapsulate so clearly at a social level right relationships and the potential we have as human beings to move into an interdependent age, which is in some way responsive to the deepest energy of the soul, the deepest love that the soul has. And the way we can expect that to happen in society is to start to see progress and movement around each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and to expect more and more and more people in all of our communities in every part of the world to become inspired by these goals. And so then this is the key, that a great stirring and moving is going on. The human world is seething in response to the inflow of spiritual energy. We think so often as human beings, we think it's what we do, and in our spiritual groups and our esoteric groups, we think it's all what we do is so important. But the way all of us are growing and seething and moving is because of the inflow of spiritual energy. And this energy has been evoked by the unrealized and inaudible cry of humanity itself. Humanity, this passage tells us, has become, for the first time in its history, spiritually invocative. So one of the things we're hoping that we might talk a little bit about now is what that means to think of humanity as being spiritually invocative, and why is that important and relevant?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, we also read recently that in the externalization of the hierarchy, uh, an amazing thing, which was because of the invocative power of humanity, that we were actually 2,300 years ahead of where the hierarchy thought we would be. They thought we wouldn't certain things wouldn't be able to happen until the age of Capricorn, which have already happened. So I don't know what that would be, but it's kind of amazing. Usually people think we're kind of behind, but how do we know? And also just to point out that I think a lot of us work in our own groups, but there's so many people out there and so many groups of people working for human betterment in so many fields. I mean, the new group of world servers we're calling it the group of world servers, is so powerful and so huge. Everywhere there's people, just good people working on projects small and large to help to make things better. And this must be from trying to view it from what the hierarchy might see. It must be really wonderful to see humanity rising up, even though some things on the outside look really horrible. That has been evoked also. It's just really inspiring to be alive these days. Even though it's true, it's not so easy.
Malia,
The other thing, go ahead,
no,
Steve, go. Oh, yes, Malia.
Oh, yeah, Malia has commented, and you're right, Malia, that I love that the heart of the Triangle's work is based on the Great Invocation. It's true, and really, it is the heart of the Triangle's work, but it's also the heart of the work that all of us are doing, and it's sort of the heart of our lives. And that's an interesting thing to think, that we, through using the Great Invocation, we are refining our call to the hierarchy, to the great field of light, which is the kingdom of the soul. It's a light which lives within ourselves, but through the Great Invocation, but also through the whole of our lives, we are learning to come outside of ourselves and to focus, to accept that we, in our incompleteness as human beings, cannot really resolve the problems that we face on our own. We don't have the necessary degrees of will, of wisdom, and of love, but that we have the colleagues and the co-workers who can radiate those qualities to us and can nourish them and enable them to grow in ourselves. And it's terribly important that we acknowledge the great centers above us and cry out, call, invoke their aid. Nothing is more important than we invoke this inflow of light and love into human consciousness, and then simply, to my way of thinking, stand back and observe the impact that is happening in the field of human consciousness over the decades and over the years and decades of our lives.
Yes. Also the fact that the science of invocation and evocation is said to be the seed of the new religion, new world religion. And we do that every month with the meetings at the full moon and the new moon. So we're creating a field of invocative power, which is also evoked by the higher powers. I mean, humanity's response is partly because of what has been evoked from humanity by the hierarchy and Shambhala. I'd like, if I could, to read a little paragraph from a paper I came across for the Arcane School, and it's on invocation and evocation in terms of Rule 3. It says, Shambhala is a goal for humanity, although very far ahead in terms of Earth, time, space. The release of the Shambhala force directly into human consciousness actually is caused by the invocative power of humanity. By law, there must be response from the bright center. And even though the personality aspect of humanity may quail at some of the outer results of this release, in the larger picture, it is right and true. It is very telling that humanity is now powerful enough in its efforts to be able to reach Shambhala. It follows then that we are ready, as it were, for the next evolutionary step. And if humanity is ready, the lives in Shambhala must be ready for their next step as well. The bright center lying far ahead also exists as the bright and clear cold center within. So I think we're witnessing some of the effects of this invocation of Shambhala in the outer world, of the distress and the destruction everywhere, which we're told is something that has to happen on many levels for the new forms to be able to do their work, because when the energies are released into a form, they're only as effective as the quality of the form itself. So we're seeing, again, great destruction and disruption, which should be a cause of joy, really.
I'd like to invite some people to raise your hands, and let's hear some other voices on this theme of invocation and what invocation means to you, why it's important, particularly in our group work, that we think so often of the radiation of the group, but the group's role to take the unvoiced, almost unvoiced cry of humanity, to reflect on it, to ponder it, to train our ears to hear that deep call of humanity and focus it into an invocation to the forces of light. Would anyone have something to say to us?
In order to raise your hand, please use a button on the control panel on your screen. For technological reason, we have to keep everyone in the audience muted because there are now 75 of us. So to avoid sound reverberations, we keep everyone muted. But please let's keep the visualization of us being in a circle, and everyone is invited to share. So we will unmute those who will raise the hand, and we'll keep you unmuted for the conversation. And I will unmute Deborah.
I love this activity and theme of group and planetary invocation and evocation, and lately the intensity of it as a world group is very visceral to me, as well as mental and so forth. But I have increasing awareness as we as a group that we experience each other almost kinesthetically, etherically, kinesthetically, and that we do so as consciously being the throat center for the planet, and that sense of speaking with one voice so very clearly, and also bringing with the tide of that group voice all the pain and suffering of other human beings, and also other kingdoms in nature, raising that up through our voice to the higher centers, gives me a great hope and vision that there can be a sort of, if you will, Jericho effect, you know, to really speed up the shattering of, really, since we're in Capricorn, crystallized, you know, old, no longer suitable forms, and the rising up like seeds of you know, the new forms that will sustain life and community. So.
Mm. Oh, thank you, Deborah. That's beautiful. It reminds me that, you know, holding this point of tension, holding this field of tension, is part of what we're supposed to do, and to create this alignment so that the higher powers can just move right through so easily. And as we learn to hold this tension in our lives and as a group, the whole quality of impersonality is so important for us to be able to do that. So that's beautiful what you said.
Thank you.
I will unmute Maria Cristina.
I would first, I imagine, start by mentioning that speaking of invocation, the words that came to mind when earlier you were speaking is let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one, which is indeed what might be being celebrated, as Barbara indicates. Nonetheless, it is painful, and a necessity, I think, in order to focus the invocative cry of humanity, is a matter of identifying ourselves, our separate selves, letting go of that separativeness and identifying with the humanity that we are. And then, as you say, coalescing into groups of recognizing that identity, that group identity. And then, interestingly, I wish I could find the quote in Cosmic Fire, but the Tibetan mentions that, well, in 2012, as I recall, during the 7-week festival at LifeBridge, it just seemed very powerfully a time, not just for group consciousness, but for groups coming together with other groups, you know, a recognition and a networking and an extending of that lighted network as groups came together as groups. And in Cosmic Fire, it mentions that this is how petals are formed in the chakras of, as these groups come together, you form petals. And I wish I could remember, because like in the chakras, planetary, humanity chakras. I'm afraid I need to talk to Michael and find the exact page. Maybe he'd probably know. I can't find it, but it's a beautiful thought.
It's a wonderful thought, Maria Christina. I think that the idea of the different groups linking, the more we have a physical experience of it, which is like what you've described, the easier it becomes that whenever we meditate, and particularly when we meditate with others, we expand the field to the interlinking of the groups that we know about, and then we expand the field to the interlinking with all those hundreds of esoteric, sometimes occult, potent occult groups working with forces of light that we know nothing about. So because then we train ourselves to become sensitive to the reality of this huge field of consciousness as hierarchy sees it. And I think that's really important.
Mm. Yes, because if we sit in a group and the people in the group, I don't know, 20 people, whatever, are all sort of representing different groups, the field is so much bigger, plus the diversity, which makes it strong.
Yes, representative of humanity.
Yes.
I will unmute Sheldon.
Well, hello, Barbara and Steve. It's so good to be with you and this whole group once again. I just wanted to comment on the, I think it was Lilia that mentioned about the great invocation, and then your comments earlier, Steve, about the goals. During this time in Capricorn, I think most of us have read this, but know that this light supernal, this unification of 7 rays, that's present and can be reached or touched or reaches us, is a better way to put it, is highly available. And DK talks about the fact that one of the first step in that precipitation, so this energy becomes available for us, was the getting out of the great invocation. Mm-hmm. So when we use the great invocation, anytime we use it, there's like a built-in, it's my experience, a built-in connection with through those energies with our brothers and sisters. It may be even more direct than that, but that's kind of the sense that I've had. So I just want to celebrate once again the use of the great invocation. Second thing, Steve, when you bring it down, as all of you who work so much, Iris and others, with the United Nations, with these United Nations goals, it seems to me that at least when I read about the goals or I see an example of something that's working well for all of humanity, I am lit up. I just want to yell, and I do sometimes.
Give us a yell, Sheldon.
Well, my voice is not good right now, but I may. I'll put myself on mute when I yell. So anyway,
it's sensible.
But the point is, there's a joy that kind of comes through, and on the other side, when we see something on television, I look at the BBC every night and want to get a larger picture. You see some of the horrendous situations that are coming to light. We know how important that is, how useful that is. But what that converts into is the demand that this end, the rule of this kind of evil, this perpetuation of this kind of standoff and war. I'm thinking about Yemen now, Saudi Arabia, and around those kind of things. And we have already in front of us these Sustainable Development Goals. So I am thrilled. Even in the midst of all of the other things going on, fires, and breakdowns, and that kind of stuff, tribalism, I am fired up by what's possible right now, and just want to say that during this time of Capricorn, this light supernal, as mystical or as esoteric as it seems, is quite available to us. And thank you for bringing all of this to our attention.
Sheldon, I love that idea of the light supernal, and the whole seed thought of I'm lost. But then in the end, Capricorn comes down the mountain and turns its back on the light and brings it down to humanity as a whole. And that idea of being the server in Aquarius after the Capricorn experience is so beautiful, because the light is shining through you to others, and you're stimulating the heart center in others. And just it's really, and as a group thinking that way, it just makes it so much more powerful, and I would imagine increases the power of the invocation that we're doing.
Beautiful, thank you. Yes.
Oh, exactly, and the thing to me that's interesting is thanks Sasha for putting the
thank you.
up on the screen. That's it's such a wonderful sort of what do you call it? A tanka. It's a wonderful tanka to watch, to look at that and ponder it, and to think that this is the result of evocation. In other words, that as we invoke light and love and this thing of presence, of spiritual presence, of spiritual power and purpose, as we evoke those qualities from the kingdom above us, that is essentially us, the hierarchy, as those energies pour into humanity, they evoke the human sort of creativity, but also the ability to gradually work together, the ability to manage conflict that can lead to achievement of goal 3, good health and well-being for all, when no one is left behind in every part of the world. That invocation and evocation of the spiritual qualities in the great, as affirmed in the great invocation, this is the result. So the more we, in a way, as activists, the deepest activity we can do to invoke, to develop our skills to invoke, which also means to develop our individual, private, secret, hidden practice of building the antakarana, but with between the personality and the soul, particularly that stage between the personality and the soul, to realize that the soul is real and to invoke the light and the love and the sense of presence and purpose into our own spiritual life. That's a contribution to the achievements of the SDGs.
You know, when I look at this card of the SDGs and look at them, I think it would be very, very interesting to really think of all the people that you know and what they're working on and what their outer work is, and see how it fits into the SDGs. Because as I look at this, I can think of most of the people I know in the community where we are doing something on one or more of these goals. It's quite remarkable to think of what's going on beyond our own little circle of our own daily life.
Exactly. The Leslie has written a lovely thought. Bless you, Leslie. Can another momentous cry of humanity and united invocation of humanity now be galvanized into expression to also rise to the attention of hierarchy in the Christ, as it happened in World War II and as it marked the turning point in World War II? I think that's a great thing for us to ponder. My response would be that that is in fact what is happening, and that's, if we can frame the narrative that that's what our work and our lives are about, bringing this focused invocation to the same pitch that it was in the Second World War. That's really what we have to do together. In our art, in every field, our profession, our art, our meditation life, our webinar life, every part of our life, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, it's so much like in World War II, and the horrible things that are going on. You can imagine ordinary, so-called ordinary people, just the horror of it all just will increase the strength of the invocation as a whole in a similar way. Creates this tension, this piece of tension that everybody's sort of living with, and they're demanding that things change. Everywhere around you, you can see people who are demanding that things change. It's amazing.
I will unmute Wendy.
This is Wendy, and I just wanted to add to this marvelous conversation that is coming out about the Great Invocation, because, excuse me, this phone, because I from my own perspective, although I have been saying it for years and years and years and years, it's only recently that the dynamic that you're calling the science of the Great Invocation is coming forward to me, and I'm beginning to understand, or to glimpse this concept of the invocation and evocation. To hear you speaking about it is deepening that awareness. It's amazing how we can say something so many times and not really know the depth and power that was given to us. I just say that from my own perspective, because like other prayers, they can begin to, we may not, we have to grow into the deeper meaning. And the fact that I understand a bit more about it, I can really, when I say it, I can engage with more ability to be present to what is being invoked, first of all, in the first part of it, and that we are reaching up for that energy from the hierarchy that is open to us. We just have to ask for it. And then through the process of evocation, humanity is to bring that energy down into the earth. So it makes us even more aware of the responsibility of humanity, and that we are a part of this. We can't just rely totally on the hierarchy to do it for us. That we are part of it. We are really part of it. So I just wanted to share that, and that what you are saying is having a great impact on myself. And I think of this, he calls it a science, which I think is amazing, an amazing word. And that it is bringing, through this invocation and evocation, light, love, and will onto the planet.
Thank you, Wendy. That's really wonderful. And it's true. I mean, we use, as you say, we use the Great Invocation. We've used it for bloody years and years and years. And it's easy to forget that it's sort of unique in all of the sort of what we might call the new spirituality. This focus that we share on invocation, on because if we say let light stream forth into the minds of men, let light descend on earth, through years and years of using this, because of our own spiritual growth, we gradually begin to have a sense of something of what light is. And in order to really realize how much we need it, but also more importantly, how much the whole of humanity needs it, for this secret, silent demand, we can direct that cry to light, and we can see that that encapsulates everything about this spiritual crisis and about what Leslie calls this momentous cry of humanity. And that really is our job, to really experience in the depth of our being, and in this, it is in the privacy of when we're on our own and when we're thinking most deeply, or when we're going to sleep at night, to think that this disease in humanity and this terrific stimulation of human consciousness is really a cry for light. And we're building a sense of the future where we imagine, where we visualize that that cry is going to become so intense that the Christ will have no choice but to actually physically take incarnation, and as a result to completely magnetize form. But we need to think, I think it's important to start thinking of our professional lives, as well as expand what we think of as our spiritual lives. So think of, if we're artists, whatever our real profession, whatever we're contributing to sort of human creativity, the fields where we're really contributing, whatever it might be, to start thinking about those fields as invocative of just light, of just these subjective qualities that are the only thing that will move consciousness up to a higher altitude, where the whole can be seen rather than just the part.
Yes.
There's some comments that came. I want to voice. Before that, just want to mention that people who share it, I don't mute you, so please mute yourself and feel free to unmute any moment if you want to add something to the conversation. So there was a comment from Douglas. Corresponding to invocation, evocation is each server's daily practice of meditation and study to gain impression followed by expression. Thus, we strengthen the work through daily spiritual practice and bring more to the groups.
Absolutely. I think that's critical, and to see that in that daily spiritual practice, Douglas, that the essence of that is invocation. We're becoming more and more refined in our sense of light, and therefore we might start with our desire for light, but then our call and our beginning to sense that it's evoking light within us.
And as that light is evoked, it has an effect on the form of purifying it and taking away anything that might veil or hide the real.
I will unmute Maria. Hello.
Hello.
Maria, hello.
Hi, Maria.
Wait a minute.
I'm Bart.
Yes, greetings. Hi, Barbara and everyone. We were just
I was trying to type in to hear something, but it will be easier to say. Barbara, when you began the introduction, I was reminded back to my youth when I was taught how to pray before I had any idea of the larger world. And at any rate, the power of invocation that was in the individual prayer, you know, the words, ask and ye shall receive, and knock and the door will be open unto you. There's a definite comparison, and it's certainly amplified when it's applied to the group. And the power of desire that we humans involve to make things happen is put into this large connotation where it actually is a demand for these wonderful goals. So that was my thought.
Well, yes, and when there is a demand, a focused demand and a massed demand, there has to be a response. It's a law. There has to be a response. So we can go forward in faith with knowing that.
Yes, and it took a while for that realization to settle into me, and you know, when you're egocentric and young and trying to identify, you forget that there are others that are like-minded, and that if you join together, you're in a band of merry men that work. And so that's the power. Anyway,
there's in Barton, I love that thought about prayer. There's a little thing I've got on my screen from Reappearance. It's on page 151. The science of invocation and evocation will take the place of what we now call prayer and worship. Be not disturbed by the use of the word science. It's not the cold and heartless intellectual thing so often depicted. It is in reality the intelligent organization of spiritual energy and of the forces of love, and these, when effective, will evoke the response of spiritual beings who can again walk openly among men, and thus establish a close relation and a constant communication between humanity and the spiritual hierarchy. But that thing of the intelligent organization of spiritual energy, in the way that's what we're just lifting prayer up to, or we're seeking.
Absolutely beautiful, and thank you, Stephen. That's what I was trying to support.
Yeah, no, this is a good, it's a wonderful conversation.
Wonderful.
There is another comment, Steve, you can read in the chat window.
Okay, let's see. From Robin. From unreal to the real. This is all part of our process. The magic of learning how to turn our attention and hold it in the real, and to do this together. Being with like-minded aids in our moving toward the real. Hearing others speak of their experience confirms my own, deepens my faith in the process. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Robin. That's the value of, and also because we need to visualize that when we meet like this, or wherever we meet, or in a physical circle, there's actually no difference. We have to expand our ability to talk eye to eye, heart to heart, and as we do so, to lift ourselves to the knowledge that it's soul to soul, and sort of invoke this solar conversation.
Hello. It's, can you hear me?
Yes, this is Kina. Kina.
Hi.
Hi.
Would just like to comment as we speak that the whole invocation, evocation, really we're acting as a link, as we know, between humanity and hierarchy, but even more so with the lower kingdoms as well, because when we meditate or pray or invoke, I mean, our little atomic lives, as we were saying, I mean, our lower selves are refined, and our lower selves, it's all of those little prisoners of the planet, if you will. It's all the atomic lives that get stimulated in the process and get vivified in the process. And it just really ties in, indeed, with the, you know, the redemption of the planet, redemption of matter.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a really good point, I think, because we might forget that it's all a huge, gigantic whole of all of the lives, all of the levels, from the mineral to the highest. It's all the same thing in different forms. And we may, I don't know, I'll speak for myself, I may tend to forget about my elementals from time to time and how wonderful they are in all sorts of ways of keeping the body healthy or whatever it is, and to honor those.
Exactly.
I will invite Richard to share.
Hello, everyone. It's actually Rebecca.
Rebecca. Yes. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca. You're sounding sort of you. Richard's become Rebecca. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's a wonderful conversation. I relate to what Bart said of young and egotistical. I think I'm old and egotistical because I have to be reminded often, and 2025 is a wonderful way to be reminded that there's, you know, so much more than just me saying my invocations, that we're all invoking together, and so we don't need to feel powerless because we're only one, because there's so many of us. But the things that have really been coming for me has been the idea of threads that have come through the conversation about form and the crystallization, of course, of Capricorn, and thinking about invocation as sound, and sound as the creative force. You know, when you go back to many levels, that creation happens through sound and everything. But then this whole idea of that there's destruction of form and there's also creation of new forms. And so I guess thoughts that are coming to me are, there's also been a lot of talk about the tension that's involved in this whole process. And so the idea that of vessels, of form as a vessel for energy, and for light and all these things, and the idea of from the Kabbalah of the breaking of the vessels and everything, the importance of vessels that can hold this energy that we're invoking seems very strong. And it's interesting what you were saying, Steve, at the beginning about the strength of this idea of the science of invocation in Bailey's work. And something that I miss in all the theosophical work is the idea of actual body work to build up a nervous system that can contain and channel this energy. And I know that's present in, say, the work of George Gurdjieff and in Steiner's work with the eurythmy. Yogananda had the yoga practice, and so we have to sort of seek, I think, sometimes, because I know somebody else mentioned this visceral, how this process is so visceral, and it's such a physical process. Sometimes when you're invoking these energies, to actually carry them, especially at very potent times. So it's something that I think we need to think about a little. Sometimes I'm sure everyone has their ways of managing, but just something to think about, because we do need these structures that can carry this energy. But it's so beautiful, what the quote that Mary Christina was referring to, that she couldn't find, but this idea that we're building up petals in lotuses as structures, as we form these groups and as we make these invocations. These are the new structures, and then the idea that the old structures are getting carried away by the light. So that's that tension again of anything that is not of the light has to sort of be washed away by the light, and somehow we have to endure this. And then when you take that out to humanity as a whole, it's like the nervous system and the communication in the body has to carry this as an individual, but the communication amongst all of us. So what was being said before about groups meeting face to face and online, and this communication system that we're building up as part of the structure that can carry the energy. And then if you take that out further to the conflict in the world, the whole process of learning how to communicate in some kind of way that's effective, so that we can resolve conflict and goodwill can be expressed. They're all sort of structural processes that need to happen, and old structures need to be destroyed and new ones need to be created.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's interesting, because there's a lot there. Just a response I have, because it's true that generally, I guess, in the theosophical work, certainly in the Bailey tradition, there is no real focus on work with form. And I was, as you were talking, I was thinking about it, and my sense is that the characteristic of this particular approach is to put the focus on the etheric and on invocation, so the magnetizing and vitalization of the etheric, and then observing the response, how the form reshaped and the impact that has on the form. In other words, invoking these energies and observing with care and with love the way in which the form, the way in which these energies evoke, what these energies evoke from the form. And I think I do sense that that's a characteristic of this teaching. Others have more of a focus on form. I don't think in any of these fields one is right and one is wrong. I think that, in fact, we're at a time when spirit and matter are coming together. So it's just slightly different emphases and slightly different focuses. And the emphasis, like we have today in the light of Capricorn, on invocation and evocation, probably is centered around etheric and around these petals, perhaps, that, as Maria Cristina brought up. And then it would be interesting, because different groups and following different teachings and different paths will tend to put different points of focus on the form.
Well, and also we understand form in a certain kind of way, where the form nature is actually the physical, etheric, astral, and mental. Yes. It's all part of the form. And the etheric can be affected by the mental focus, and the direction of thoughts into the etheric can affect it, which therefore affects the whole, the larger etheric. And I think you know, all of the groups contributing in their own particular ways with their own particular energies and notes, and are creating an effect in the etheric, which can only be invocative, as we know.
One other thought that I have that I think is always important in groups, and all of the group work we do and all of the work we do when we meet in circles and in webinars and so on and so forth, is this can also be a distraction, because the esoteric work is subjective, and so when we meet particularly eye to eye and face to face, and also electronically eye to eye and face to face as we're doing now, it's important to see that that our real meeting is subjective, and not to lose the focus on the subjective, on the qualities of love that light can enable us to bring into expression in the group life, because that's what esoteric work, that's almost by definition esoteric. So we need to be able to meet together, hold the intuition as the focus, and allow the intuition to, while being together, work together subjectively. And that's sort of like, it's a challenge, I think, now for us a lot. For many people, meeting in circles is the beginning and is a wonderful work, and it's a whole focus in itself, which is great. The esoteric work, to my sense,
they won't.
Sort of asks someone to come into a group in service. So rather than as a place where we necessarily, anyway, whatever, I don't know. Look, there's a couple, just Louise, at 2:49 p.m. in Eastern regular time, whatever it is, Louise said we can have access to 4 good webinars on the Great Invocation at this address, which is great. Can everyone see that? It's a makara.us address, webinars, greatinvocation.html. That's wonderful. Thank you,
the chat window, so it's a clickable link. It's a website ran by Seven Ray Institute and Mike Rollins. Yeah.
Yep, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. And then Risa, Barbara, do you want to read Risa's?
Yes. Well, she has 2, but I'd like to read the second one first, because it's about she said, and this is, it's a quote about the word science from Externalization 4:14. Be not disturbed by the use of the word science. It is not the cold and heartless intellectual thing so oft depicted. It is in reality the intelligent organization of spiritual energy and the forces of love, and when effective, will evoke the response of spiritual beings who can again walk openly among men and thus establish a close relation and a constant communication between humanity and the spiritual hierarchy. And this reminds me of many stories that one hears about scientists and when they make a breakthrough. And usually they've done it in a very sort of contemplative kind of meditative way. And it may not be during an active period of meditation, but they know that they are they're setting up the field so that something can drop into their consciousness. Something can drop into their brain consciousness, and it's a very interesting process. If you know any real scientists who work that way, so I think that's really important to remember. So I just wanted to ask Sasha, the meditation that we're going to do, how long is that supposed to be?
Oh, it's up to us. We actually can start shortly. There is one more raised hand Iris wanted to share, so I would like to unmute Iris.
Okay.
And then we could start preparing for the meditation.
Hello, thank you.
Hi, Iris.
Hi, thank you so much for this great discussion. I just have two things I wanted to mention quickly. One is I just get excited like Sheldon, and I just want to yell, and I yell sometimes, especially when I think about the Sustainable Development Goals, that humanity has a plan, because it's so much, it's an example of the plan with a capital P of how far humanity has progressed, and that this plan is so aligned with the plan with a capital P, because its main point of leaving no one behind and starting with the least developed first. So anyway, that just gets me all excited. But the other thing, Barbara, and I had to get on, I got on late, so I don't know whether I was going to respond to Leslie's comment about another invocatory appeal. And I don't know whether you mentioned that section on page 174 from externalization, and she's responding to that, or no?
No, I was just saying
You go, Iris.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to bring up in response to your comment, Leslie, about is there another invocation that we could put forth with massed intent? And I just opened to page 174 in externalization of the hierarchy the other day, and it corresponds to this period in time that we're within now. It's between Christmas and the full moon of January. And I just realized last night that we have 2 full moons in January, so that extends this even longer. And that has to do with the approach of the spirit of peace. And you can look it up yourselves, but I'll just read at the very end. It says, to those of you who can appreciate and use the great invocation, I would suggest its renewed and earnest use. This alternative invocation might, however, be suggested and found useful. And this is it. O Lord of light and love, come forth and rule the world. May the Prince of Peace appear and end the warring of the nations. May the reign of light and love and justice be begun. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with us.
Oh, that's beautiful, Iris.
Well, thank you. Fabulous.
I read also somewhere recently that we are meant to invoke consciously the spirit of peace, which I know Dot Maver is working on all the time.
Right. It seems so important right now. So this, if you want, if I can type this invocation into the chat box too.
Thank you.
Oh yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
I think it was a very beautiful quote that prepares us for the meditation. So we, after this rich sharing, we built very potent focus for our group meditation. So Steve or Barbara, or together, please lead us in meditation.
Barbara.
Okay. So we'll do the full moon meditation that the Lucis Trust does. And I will first read the keynote of the full moon approach to hierarchy. He who faces the light and stands within its radiance is blinded to the issues of the world of men. He passes on the lighted way to the great center of absorption. But he who feels the urge to pass that way, yet loves his brother on the darkened path, revolves upon the pedestal of light and turns the other way. He faces towards the dark, and then the 7 points of light within himself transmit the outward streaming light, and lo, the face of those upon the darkened way receives that light. For them the way is not so dark. Behind the warriors, twixt the light and dark, blazes the light of hierarchy. Letting in the light. group fusion. We affirm the fact of group fusion and integration within the heart center of the group of world servers, mediating between hierarchy and humanity. I am one with my group brothers, and all that I have is theirs. May the love which is in my soul pour forth to them. May the strength which is in me lift and aid them. May the thoughts which my soul creates reach and encourage them. Alignment. We project a line of lighted energy towards the spiritual hierarchy of the planet, the planetary heart, the great ashram of Sanat Kumara, and towards the Christ at the heart of hierarchy. Extend the line of light towards Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known. Higher interlude. Hold the contemplative mind open to the extraplanetary energies streaming into Shambhala and radiated through hierarchy. Using the creative imagination, endeavor to see the three planetary centers, Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity, gradually coming into alignment and interplay. Meditation on the seed thought for Capricorn. Lost am I in light supernal, yet on that light I turn my back. Precipitation. Visualize the energies of light, love, and the will to good pouring throughout the planet and becoming anchored on Earth in prepared physical plane centers through which the plan can manifest. Use the sixfold progression of divine love as the sequence of energy precipitation. Shambhala, hierarchy, the Christ, the group of world servers, men and women of goodwill everywhere in the world, physical centers of distribution. The lower interlude. Refocus the consciousness as a group within the periphery of the great ashram. Sound the affirmation. In the center of all love I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Visualize the downpouring spiritual inflow released from Shambhala through the hierarchy and streaming into humanity through the prepared channel. Consider how these inpouring energies are establishing the pathway of light for the coming world teacher, the Christ. Distribution. As the great invocation is sounded, visualize the outpouring of light and love and power from the spiritual hierarchy through the 5 planetary inlets: London, Darjeeling, New York, Geneva, Tokyo, irradiating the consciousness of the whole human race. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thank
Barbara,
you.
for that meditation.
Thank you, everybody. Wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you all, Barbara. Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for being together.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful gathering on the mountaintop under this Capricorn energy. And please join us for our next webinars. The next webinar will be on January 19th. Actually 17th, there is a mistake here on the screen. January 17th. It's going to be the Capricorn New Moon webinar with the meditation to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this time, under the Capricorn energies, we will focus on goal number 1, no poverty. And the next webinar after that would be Aquarius Solar Festival webinar on January 28th with the Sydney Goodwill unit from Australia. We'll focus our meditative attention on the topic of goodwill and group alignment. Thank you, everyone. Happy full moon and happy new year. Namaste.